Greetings everyone, peace to you all. Welcome to another episode of Praiseworthy Reviews, where we go through video games to see if they're excellent and commendable. Today we will be reviewing A Plague Tale: Innocence, the stealth action adventure game by Asobo Studio. Players play as Amicia de Rune, a teenage girl who attempts to evade the Inquisition and swarms of rats carrying the Black Plague as she escorts her brother to safety in 14th century France. As usual, we will be evaluating the game based on 5 criteria: fun factor, educational value, cultural value, spiritual value, and cost. The technical state of the game is surprisingly buggy for a game that was released almost 6 years ago. In a few places, the game seems to present a choice that would allow Amicia to use the tools at her disposal, but it always ends with her death if you do not use the game's preferred solution, which is irritating, but not a showstopper. Most of these bugs can be worked around by trying a different solution. For context, prior to this review, I have finished the game to the credits. So without further ado, let's jump in. As a stealth action adventure game, A Plague Tale: Innocence focuses mainly on 2 types of gameplay: the stealth/combat and the puzzles. There is some exploration as well, but not enough for me to really consider it to be its own aspect of gameplay. In the stealth and combat gameplay, Amicia and Hugo are generally trying to get away from the Inquisition or from English soldiers. Most of the time, this involves doing the things you might expect: running when soldiers are not looking, hiding behind walls or in tall grass, and creating distractions by throwing things. As the game progresses, more and more often, Amicia is forced to directly confront soldiers with violence, using her trusty sling. While this is basically necessary in some parts of the game, combat always feels a little challenging. But that's not unreasonable given the nature of the story. Combat isn't exactly a chore, but I wouldn't call it fun either. What is a little surprising is that a boss is introduced very early in the game, but then there are almost no bosses after that, with the exceptions of the 2 main antagonists, which is kind of a letdown. There's a little bit of RPG-type progression in equipment upgrades, and Amicia does gain more skills as the game progresses, but it's not much. For me, the more fun aspect of the game is probably the puzzles. In many parts of the game, there are puzzles that Amicia must solve in order to progress past a given area. Amicia must take advantage of her tools and surroundings, utilizing food to distract rats, light to scare rats, and sometimes the environment to crush rats or to keep rats out. While these puzzles don't really do anything new that past games have not done, the fact that the game frames the puzzles in the context of the rats and the plague does a lot to create tension and therefore entertainment in overcoming each of the puzzles. However, there are some frustrating puzzles and combat sequences in a few key places, where imprecise mechanics may make it so that the player knows what needs to be done but have a little bit of trouble, not because of intentional difficulty, but because the player doesn't do it in the exact order or from the exact location the game expects, which is quite irritating. Taking all that into consideration, I'm going to give Innocence 3 stars for fun factor. As far as educational value is concerned, A Plague Tale: Innocence has a few motor skills that are used in combat, but it is very relaxed and has essentially no punishments for failure other than restarting at the last checkpoint. As a result, there is little procedural knowledge to be gleaned. Similarly, the puzzles are not that difficult, and honestly, it doesn't feel like any problem-solving muscles are being exercised in your brain, which is, again, a little disappointing. However, there is still some educational value. A Plague Tale: Innocence, as the game may suggest, is about a plague, more specifically, a bubonic plague. Throughout different parts of the game, facts about the historical setting are referenced, but perhaps not as much as they could have been. Still, there are historical facts that can be learned, such as Edward III's ambitions for the French throne during the 100 Years' War. Likewise, there are some unusual facts about the Black Death, and though these facts may be questionable, it does invite the curious to look into the inquiry. The Inquisition and the Grand Inquisitor also play an integral role in the story, although perhaps this part of the story is less factual. Overall, I'm going to give Innocence 3 stars for educational value. Even though A Plague Tale: Innocence is weaker in mechanics and educational value, the cultural value is stronger. The art of the game is quite breathtaking. Innocence manages to make the French countryside, with its villages, catacombs, and castles, look simultaneously gorgeous and frightening. While most of the animation is functional but not impressive, one aspect of the animation stands out, and that is the rats. The rats move quickly, frighteningly so, in ways that are disturbing, and worst of all, there are tons of them. Swarms, hordes. Honestly, it's kind of impressive how many rats are on the screen at the same time, without experiencing stuttering or frame drops. The music is mostly orchestral, with strings used to convey the unnatural tension that the rats bring.
Let's try it.
It's not particularly powerful, but it definitely conveys the moods.
Are you stupid or what?
I am not stupid!
Don't shout.
The voice acting is not great. Many of the characters, including Amicia and Hugo, don't feel particularly vulnerable or convey the emotions well.
I want to see
Mommy is dead, Hugo.
The French accents don't feel particularly convincing, and for the most part, the delivery of the lines didn't move me much. The writing is good in some ways, but weak in most others. The historical setting is utilized effectively, evoking uncertainty and danger at the risk that the plagues, the Inquisition, and war bring. The characters of Amicia and Hugo do come across as desperate children trying to survive in a relentlessly cruel world, and sympathy for them outweighs the irritation that may come from the childish tantrums. However, the dialogue is simply nothing to write home about. The plot is rather simplistic, and while there are reasonable developments, overall the story is not engaging or moving, even if there are a few good moments. Third-party analysts estimate that at time of recording, 6 years after launch, the game has gone on to sell approximately 1.8 million units, and it has won a few awards, like the Steam Award for Outstanding Story-Rich Game in 2019. A sequel, A Plague Tale Requiem, was released in 2022, and a prequel, Resonance, A Plague Tale Legacy, is expected in 2026. Overall, I'm going to assign Innocence 4 stars for its cultural value. For a game whose protagonists are children and has the word innocence in the title, A Plague Tale Innocence has a lot of negative content. The Inquisition, and therefore by extension most of the Catholic Church, is portrayed quite negatively throughout the game, although the game does take a moment to have the Pope condemn what the Inquisition is doing.
The Pope considers you a threat. Vitalis Benevent, you are to be excommunicated.
There's quite a bit of profanity, with the F-bomb being used quite regularly by antagonists and sometimes even by the children. There's no nudity, sex, alcohol, or substance abuse. However, there is quite a bit of violence, with many soldiers and villagers dying, killed by others, or eaten alive by rats. The rats are portrayed as borderline supernatural, almost like they are possessed, and they consume many people alive. There are also a few sections where there are mounds and mounds of dead bodies, as might be expected during the Black Plague. As far as positive content is concerned, even though the church is portrayed negatively, some of the priests and the monks are portrayed positively, and Amicia herself prays to the cross a few times, although never directly invoking the Lord. There is no ESRB rating for this game, but it's obviously very mature and should be approached with caution. The themes of the game are either neutral or positive, but they are not particularly powerful or inspiring. For more analysis on the themes of the game, check out my Biblical Themes video for this game. Overall, I'm going to give Innocence 3 stars for spiritual value. As far as cost is concerned, the main story of Innocence is pretty short. For the time poor, Innocence can be completed in about 10 hours. For the time rich, there is unfortunately little replayability or optional content here. There are some random things that you can collect, and there are a few hidden secrets here or there, but I highly doubt that anyone will replay for those things. At time of recording, Innocence is a 6-year-old game, and it retails for $39.99 USD, which I think is very poor value, but sometimes can be found for about 80% off, which I think is okay. Overall, based on the content value, narrative accessibility, and asking price, I'm going to give Innocence 4 stars for cost. A Plague Tale Innocence does little to innovate in terms of a stealth action adventure. The game is quite linear in terms of both the world and the narrative. While I often appreciate straightforward storytelling, the level design feels weaker and a little too simplistic, and the options that Amicia has are relatively limited. She's not Solid Snake, and she also has to hold Hugo's hand for most of the game. But this fact somehow manages to not be a negative feature of the game, but one of its defining traits. Despite the sympathetic characters, overall the story doesn't do much to invest the player, and by the end of the game, I was ready for the story to be wrapped up.
Quick!
Based on the criteria discussed in the video, I subjectively assign A Plague Tale Innocence the rating of Sale Selection. That's all I have for you in this video.
I'll be back soon.
Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, sharing the video with your friends, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.